This topic is something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. You guys saw the thumbnail, the title. You know that there is a poke bias when it comes to Overwatch, and I'm not specifically going to talk about tank and support. I feel like the direction in those two roles is a little bit different compared to where damage has been going, and it's something that I've been realizing that when it comes to the DPS in Overwatch, there's something about them like the inherent fun factor, or as well as what made each character unique, feels like it's gone down over time, and more characters are beginning to feel a lot more closely aligned to one another. And I think one of that has to do with the fact that the game, especially for the balance direction for a lot of DPS, is leaning very much towards like enabling poke a lot more than it has in allowing for a unique style of brawl or dive. And if we just take an example over here, let's look at Hanzo. One of the things that they did this past year to Hanzo was that they increased the projectile speed of his the storm arrows, right? His E ability. And what does that mean? That means that his poke is going to connect much faster. If you look at the change they gave Genji recently as a buff, the justification they used was to allow the shurikens to connect faster before a target escapes. I assume this is their logic when it comes to poke in general, is that because there's so much sustain in the game, they expect you to use poke to somehow counter it. Now, I could be wrong. That might not be their logic, but there is a consistency in this philosophy that's being spread across the DPS. So I just talked about Hanzo. Genji as well got a projectile speed increase in order to, connect his projectiles faster, and that certainly benefited his poke a lot more than it benefited his dueling. If you look at some other projectile DPS characters, we have Echo, who they just recently tightened her spread. She already had decently fast projectiles, but now it's easier to hit the poke on that character. One of the Junkrat perks as well gives him faster projectile speed at the cost of one ammo, one extra ball, and that allows him to poke down other characters better before they can do something into him. And again, if you look at the name of the game right now, with some of the better DPS picks being Sojourn and Freya, well, they are characters that are inherently designed around the concept of poking and taking people out via poke. You can look at Venture, and Venture's probably the only outlier over here when it came to design and a philosophy shift. But now they're not trying to perhaps help Venture from the perspective that give them the ability to take duels better. They went ahead and increased the fire rate. Now, the fire rate increase just means that Venture has much better poke pressure, right? Like when they're taking those close range fights and everything, they can just poke, and annoy the crap out of you. And I don't know if this is the direction that we should be taking when it comes to perhaps enabling some of these more unique characters. Another way, I'm not saying this character is a poke character now, but something interesting is that, I've been saying that Tracer is the strongest she's ever been. One of the reasons for that has been is because they reduced the spread on her weapon, and in the dev note, they said that they wanted it to give Tracer a little bit more range so that she doesn't have to be, so close to getting like one-shotted by most things in the game. But now with the 6 damage breakpoints and that previous spread reduction, that obviously gives her a little bit more range. She has a little bit more range that she doesn't need to like super get close. In fact, in the background right now will be some Tracer footage, and you can see me min-maxing this like range with the 6 damage pellets. And honestly, Tracer is in a very, 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 very scary spot right now. And we will talk about Tracer tomorrow. Tomorrow's video is going to be the nerf Tracer video. But before that, like, this is the direction that we've been seeing the game constantly go down. In fact, if you even look at one of Symmetra's major perks, it allows her beam range to increase, and that allows the beam to just extend further and poke down another character better. And I feel like, the duelist playstyles in the game are beginning to slowly lose purpose in the game. And I feel like that's something that I thought would thrive a lot more in 5v5, but with how strong sustainability has become across tanks and even across certain supports, it's begun to feel like that like DPS has progressively become more and more homogenized. I mean, even throughout the last year, Torbjorn got a lot of changes to help with his poke as well. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he did get a projectile speed change or increase or something like that, so that it was easier for him to connect those shots in succession. Reaper's rework was to give him a little bit more range. Remember, like, this is something, if I'm remembering correctly, that Alec Dawson or somebody from the balance team, I don't remember who, but I do think it was Alec, who talked about that one of the goals with the Reaper rework was to give him a little bit more range so that he could do something as he slowly, progressively like close the distance between him and his target. And now with the major perk, he has that right click button, which honestly is just super inconsistent. There's very, 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 very few cases where it works out. 9 times out of 10, you're taking the other perk because it's better. But you can see that across the interesting character choices that perhaps didn't fully lean into just doing a lot of spam poke pressure, they've been taken down their route. Another character that fell prey to this, and man, do I miss the old projectile speed for this character, is Pharah. Pharah didn't used to just, ultra fast, like shoot out rockets like in one succession after another. There was a decent amount of delay before the next shot came out. So if you look at the past gameplay of Pharah, a lot of it was about lining up one shot to another. Now, I'm not saying you don't line up your next shot to another, but it does certainly make it much easier to follow up when your fire rate is so fast that you can shoot out one rocket and then quickly shoot out another rocket in between shooting one rocket, a small delay, and then the next rocket. I felt like back in the day with the slower projectiles, what was really nice about them was that it gave you a window to be able to also counterplay them by moving out their way and things like that. So the better projectile players had to be much more, how do I say this? I had to be much more consistent with their follow-up aim than they did with just outright spamming down a choke and or a target and hoping it worked out. And nowadays, it kind of feels like the projectile DPS role just feels like spam down a main choke with your poke damage and hopefully it works out, right? Like even Freya, I like Freya's design a lot, but even Freya's a character that's designed around the entire idea that, well, this character must play safe in the poking phase and excel in the poking phase. But if it comes down to taking a duel with this character, she's going to just not excel at all. But then you have a character design like Sojourn, who is kind of just good at everything. But this isn't the video about Sojourn, and technically Sojourn's more hit scan based than she is projectile DPS, because Freya technically falls into projectile DPS entirely. So it's just an observation of mine that the longer we have overstayed our welcome within the 5v5 format, the more these characters are beginning to feel so similar to one another that perhaps what made them feel more different to play is beginning to get lost with time, and more like, yes, Farah is still Farah and Echo is still Echo, but perhaps the feeling of how you used to aim with them or how you used to land shots with them, that is kind of being lost over time. I think another change that really damaged this was the projectile size changes. Now, like I said, I don't personally mind it. I'm not a fan of it. I get why they did it, but a lot of these like changes that they're doing, it feels like they're just trying to make the game repeatedly easier. Like, of course, at the low elo, it's much easier for them to just spam down a choke with fast fire rates and get value than it is to perhaps line up a fire rocket from one target space to another, right? So this is just some ramblings, like early morning ramblings that I woke up and honestly, it's been on my mind. That's something I've been thinking about, that wow, like the direction of Overwatch has just kind of been like this. Like, I feel like we're losing a lot of what made characters unique. And if you look at a character like Sombra, I feel like she's one of the very few characters left that is interesting and unique, just because she plays so hardcore into that virus hack combo playstyle. And one of my worries as well, what if we lose Sombra? What if Sombra also becomes another poke slop character, right? I'm not saying every character is a poke slop character. I'm just saying the changes that are happening in the game are beginning to take characters down more of just being able to poke better rather than trying to find different niches for them to excel in. Another question of mine is, when does like what if they buff up Mei's projectile damage? Or not damage, but like the attack speed on it, right? So it shoots out faster, because they might use the excuse that, well, it's actually hard for Mei to secure a kill because of the current day and age of there being so much mobility creep, right? Although I doubt that's gonna happen, but I won't be surprised if it did. Perhaps I might even pull off a prediction over there. Symmetra's orbs in Overwatch 2 did get a really big attack speed increase as well. A slight charge speed increase, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. And then their speed got increased as well, so that she could poke out other characters better. So that is a constant trend that we are seeing happen in the DPS role, specifically to projectile DPS, right? And if we just kind of flip the script and go over to tank, I feel like one of the tanks that might actually get this as a change could possibly be Sigma, because Sigma is not necessarily the best tank in the game right now, and even on his poke maps, there are now officially better options to play. On some of the poke maps, you're actually better off nowadays playing Orisa and Ramatra because of the way perks work than you are playing Sigma. And that's not to say that Sigma's bad, it's just like Sigma's kind of aging really poorly with the ever-evolving game, right? And that makes it really sad to see that perhaps if we don't dial back some of these changes or perhaps reevaluate what we are doing with the game, then perhaps what made Overwatch really interesting from a certain perspective of gameplay engagement and like the way characters interacted with one another, I feel like slowly and progressively we're beginning to lose it to time. And with more of these projectile speed increase coming, and we're not looking at breakpoints, we're not trying to bring back some previous playstyles. Like for tank, I've been concerned that like 90% of the tanks that we've gotten are literally just brawl tanks. Hazard, as much as we wanted him to be a dive hybrid like character, he's literally just been a character that works out 10 times better if you play him in a brawl playstyle. Junker Queen is a brawl playstyle. Orissa's poke brawl hybrid, but she fits into both niches really well, especially with her perks. You can take her to a more poke focus or a more brawl focus with the barrier to slow down the game and play around her and take that duel with the other tank. Ramatra is also poke brawl hybrid. A lot of the characters have just been that poke brawl hybrids, and my next concern is also the same thing for the next hero in tank design. Is this character also just going to be a poke brawl hybrid? Like, are we never gonna see a unique dive character in this game ever again? And then on the flip side, like with the next support, Wu Yang, the code name Aqua, is he also going to be a character that perhaps leans straight into just poke, poke, poke? Or will he perhaps be a character that looks to enable dive centric compositions? Because I'm not gonna lie, guys. Like, it is kind of sad to see that a new flavor of dive just has not happened in the era of Overwatch 2. It's kind of been a revisit to Overwatch 1 compositions that we're making work, and perhaps shoehorning in some Overwatch 2 characters like Sojourn into it. I wouldn't necessarily call Junker Queen Goats a dive comp either. I do know some people have tried to convince me that, well, Junker Queen Goats is kind of like a dive comp. I'm like, I doubt it. I would say it's a faster, brawly comp. But these are just some of my ramblings, guys. I don't know. Like, maybe I'm officially beginning to really overthink the state of the game. But does anybody else have this same feeling about? Is at least in DPS, like the direction of the characters has been super poke focused and not duel focused. Tracer and Reaper are the only ones that recently got breakpoint changes that allows them to duel better. But my question is, why are we not looking to try and do that for some other characters too that fit into dueling better, right? Like Echo can take duels with her beam and all of that, and that's kind of been nerfed. Genji's shuriken damage is what allowed him to really take those duels, and I have a theory on why that's not the case, but before I dig into that, I would just love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. And also, as always, shout outs to the patrons over here. Much love to you guys. If you want to support the channel financially, you can use the Patreon, and I would gladly appreciate it. And then on the flip side, if you want to support this channel for free, all you have to do is hit like and drop a comment. Let me know, what do you think? Are we in a poke bias, or am I kind of overthinking it? With that being said, I look forward to reading your comments.